Hi all! Today we will continue on the topic of spiritual practices, spiritual practitioners, and existing myth about them. My previous stream generated a lot of interest, and I would like to cover some other aspects of this topic. For instance, I have promised to talk about the protectors of Buddhism teaching, about those who defend spiritual teachers and help them to develop correct attitude toward themselves. When we talk about a true spiritual teacher, whose mission is to pass on the knowledge to his students, and not just to any student, but only to a chosen one, to the student who is ready to follow him. So he's passing on the wisdom of spiritual practices and the knowledge on how to fulfill them. The process of teaching requires a teacher a complete and total dedication. This dedication makes it impossible for the teacher himself to devote time and attention to many other aspects of his life. Aspects like psychological defense or self-protection against manipulation. He needs the help of spiritual realm to cover this part for him. The same as in the physical realm, the teacher will require assistance in organizing and managing his work, so he can fully concentrate on the teaching itself. There are known 4 types of activities in Tantra: pacifying, developing, threatening, and destroying. Being that the teacher cannot devote himself to those 4 activities, he is getting help from Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The spiritual protectors will act out these 4 activities instead of him, while he is busy spreading the teaching. Not many understand the importance of threatening and destroying activity of the protectors. They will defend the teacher. They will scare away the student or remind him of his place, in case the student intentionally or unintentionally distorting the teaching process. The thing is that the teaching itself and the role of the teacher in it are very important. I mean, there's only one teacher surrounded by many students, and if one of the students harms the teacher, the wrathful deities will intervene and deal with the students. They will make him stop. If it is a true spiritual teacher that is passing on the tradition, you can be sure that there is a magnetizing and wrathful deity standing behind his back. Please don't get confused if you see a spiritual teacher that is so calm and friendly and tolerant. You can be sure that if somebody will disturb his teaching process, the wrathful protectors will intervene. It is important to understand that it's not about the student doing something against the teacher in a personal way, but rather if he is harming or stopping the teaching process itself. Let's say a student feels frustrated and edgy, and he starts to interrupt and distort the teacher. Or he ruins the mood of his fellow students or the mood of the teacher. It is important to remember that the teacher is just a human being. The teacher's good spirits are important to the rest of the students who are willing to learn from him at this very moment. In this kind of situations, wrathful defenders will protect the teacher. As we discussed in our previous stream, during the learning process, students often fall out of the group dynamic. At times, they even might see a teacher in the role of his or her parent, which obviously leads to crossing borders. It happens to every student. So it's quite a common situation when defenders have to intervene, and they will put the student back to his place. They will bring him back to in a productive state. And after such an interaction with the wrathful protectors, a student doesn't have any desire to continue the same line of behavior. I should emphasize it and say it again, that these kind of situations, they happen all the time and they happen to everybody. So if it happened to you and you were approached by the defenders in an aggressive way, there is a tradition to perform a practice of redemption. After realizing that you did something wrong and it led to this interaction with the defenders, you call out the protectors of the teacher and ask for forgiveness, even if you don't know who they are and what are their names. It's worth mentioning that This is one of the reasons why spiritual teachers will make wrathful deities retreats before becoming a teacher. They should strengthen the bond with the spiritual protector. It is an essential part of the tradition to strengthen the bond with the spiritual protectors. There are some similar practices in shamanism. However, in Buddhism, this bond is about connection with the wrathful Adams. So, in those situations where student did something wrong, intentionally or unintentionally, he should ask forgiveness from the wrathful Adams for his behavior. The student should acknowledge his mistake and promise not to make this mistake again. This aspect of redemption and forgiveness is crucial not only in Buddhism, but also in other religions. The reason why the redemption is so important is that a person's life is controlled by his decision. And when a person takes an honest decision to change, the environment that surrounds him and all the living beings in it will react accordingly. We don't know yet if the student will manage to stick to his promise. But if the student wants to continue his contact with the teacher, he must take this decision and give a promise not to make the same mistake again. Let's talk about what are the most common mistakes students make when they interact with a teacher. And one of them is a disrespect. It can be expressed in many ways. For example, a student didn't thank enough or didn't put enough attention. Maybe he didn't devote enough time or called out the teacher in a disrespectful way. Please understand that the teacher personally doesn't need your apologies. He's not interested in that. You should do it for yourself. You should do it in sake of restoring a proper communication with the teacher. While it is expected that the teacher has already overcome the main negative emotions such as attachment, hopes, or anger, perhaps he didn't overcome them fully yet, but he is way better in managing them than his students. Well, that's exactly the reason why he's a teacher, right? So he finished the path that his students are currently taking, and he remembers very well how it was. He knows that the way the student expressed themselves is defined by cause and effect relationship. For instance, if a person suffered from violence during his childhood, in a natural way, he will be expressing violence in every unfamiliar situation. Or if a person was used by others in every stressful situation, he will express resentment, and so on. Basically, a person's present expression is defined by what he was lacking in the past. And the teacher knows it very well. He can see the roots of your behavior. That's why if you have violated the rules, you shouldn't be worried about what the teacher thinks about you now. It's enough to perform the traditional practices I described earlier. So again, the teacher understands you, but you still have to offer your apologies to the protectors, offer mandala, and evolve a sense of generosity. Please let me know in the comments if you get this concept. Okay, let's continue to the next topic. Next, I would like to explain how it happens that a spiritual practitioner or a teacher even gets into this situation where he needs a help of wrathful deities and the spiritual realm, and what could be a possible cause of indecency towards spiritual practitioners. So, it's all about this myth, this common misconception about the spiritual people. It seems to many that if a spiritual practitioner or a teacher practices meditation, non-doing, if he's working on overcoming the main 5 demons, the main 5 afflictions, which are ignorance, the sense of self-importance, attachments, aversions, and fear of death. So many people believe that if one is aiming to overcome those afflictions, then he must be very friendly and cute and soft-spoken. People around him automatically assume that it should be very easy to control such a practitioner and such a person. For some reason, they have this illusion that if one is not expressing negative emotions, it will make him limber, spongy, and manageable. This illusion arises quite often. The reason behind it is that in a normal life situation, when you meet someone who is overly good and kind and generous to you, more than you usually expect, you start to suspect that this person just simply needs something from you. It is quite often when normal people will meet for the first time a spiritual practitioner, they will get this wrong impression. When they're approached with compassion and kindness, they get this feeling that there is a reason why this guy is so nice to me. He definitely needs something from me. And then, obviously, they start to behave accordingly to what they're used in a normal daily life. The moment they sense they are needed, they will become much more confident and comfortable, even sloppy and disrespectful. They are tricked into this illusion that if the teacher is so great and all forgiving, he can be easily manageable. But it's a silly misconception. I mean, just think about it. Someone who fully or partially overcame the worst of human nature. He overcame a fear of death, ego, a sense of self-importance, jealousy, anger, attachment. Do you really believe that this experience will make him more manageable for others? Well, it's obviously not. The spiritual teacher gathered lots of power. His calm and balanced state of mind is an expression of his inner power. Don't be mistaken to think that you can lie or trick him. There is one more aspect I would like to talk about. When new students or accident listeners start to act indecently, they're getting stopped not by the teacher, but by the environment. The environment intervenes and defends a person who is important to others. And the teacher is important to the rest of the students who are present there, to the more progressive ones who are ready to listen and learn from him at this very moment. It is a crucial thing to understand. The teacher is not angry with you. He understands very well where you're coming from and why you're doing things in a certain way. He overcame his anger as a reaction, but you are where you are. And until you keep projecting your inner conflicts and issues on the teacher, he won't be able to teach you in a productive way. That's why there are protectors who will stop this projection and get students on the path of correction. Okay, let's move on to the next myth I would like to talk about. This myth is especially popular in the West communities. It is another misconception about true spiritual practitioners. As we discussed in the previous stream, a spiritual practitioner is someone on the path of enlightenment. Not only that this person is trying to be truly good, but it's a much higher level, okay? We are talking about someone who tries to live non-duality in his daily life, someone who truly chose the path of liberation. So there's this wrong assumption that nothing bad can come from such a person. They picture this person as a goddess of the spring or the god of prosperity. Wherever he comes, prosperity follows him, and the flowers instantly bloom. Like a Snow White in a fairy tale, the wild animals will gather around him to sing along and help him out. Of course, there is a blessing that follows him, but there are some crucial details that you should understand. One of the blessings that are coming from practice of non-duality and undoing is acceleration of life events, the speed up of karma ripening. So when a practitioner is overcoming his ego and getting into a natural state of mind, what happens is that all the people around him unwillingly get into the natural state of mind with him. To illustrate that, let's imagine that you have applied for a job you don't want to do. and you happen to sit on a bench in a park next to the person who was correctly meditating and being in a natural state of mind. Even though you are not familiar with this person, after just a few minutes sitting next to him, you will get involved into the same state. You will suddenly have a clear mind, the clear understanding that you shouldn't take this job offer. Or perhaps you'll receive a call from a recruiter saying that you didn't get this position. This is one of the examples that even a presence in the environment of natural state of mind will destroy what's destined to be destroyed. If normally it will take months or a year for the situation to ripe and unfold, the natural state of mind speeds up this process. And this could be a reason of a sudden destructive events in the life of people who recently started to interact with the teacher. It is not a demonic influence. And how could you differentiate where is it accelerated process to relieve you, or is it the result of demonic influence? The difference is very clear. If some part of your life was destroyed under the influence of the teacher, it will be very quick. There will be no serious consequences of the loss, and you will fairly quickly understand the benefit coming from the loss of this part of your life. You will see that there was no use in keeping it, and usually you don't suffer emotionally as much as you would normally do. However, if the destruction came from the demonic influence, it will be very painful, with a long recovery and persisting feeling of emptiness and lack of satisfaction. Because the person undergoing this loss didn't gain anything from this process. So it is a very important moment to understand there will be distractions. The things that have to be destroyed will be destroyed. Moreover, there is one more aspect I have to explain. The teacher is constantly followed by many spirits, and not all of those spirits are good. There are also some evil spirits that wish to interfere. The teacher is constantly interacting with them. He will make an offerings to pacify them or some other stuff to suppress them. As long as the student is under the blessing and protection of the teacher, none of those entities will attack or possess him. Not during the rituals and not during the learning. None of those entities, those foreign entities, is going to attack you. However, the moment you start an inner conflict with your teacher, you provide those evil spirits an access to get into you. Those evil spirits are constantly monitoring. If they have a chance to harm, they will. Just because they are evil, hungry for conflicts and distraction. You could witness the situation that I'm describing before an important moment when a teacher would like to pass on the new knowledge. Those entities might try to interfere with the process by possessing one of the students. The student might start to act very weirdly. However, the teacher is well aware of that. If you happen to be the student that was possessed and tried to disrupt unintentionally the teaching process, don't be worried. It's not the end of the world. It can happen. You just have to fulfill the practice of purification and redemption to get back under the protection of the spiritual defenders. You have to restore things as they were before. Let's say it again. A teacher will express goodness and kindness. He will always be willing to accept you back. But please don't mistake it for stupidity or spinelessness or manageability. The moment the student gets this illusion that his teacher can be managed or manipulated, the wrathful Adams, his protectors, will first give the student a warning. Then, Adams will express themselves in a threatening form to discourage students from behaving this way. And what I just described applies only if you have a personal bond and personal communication with your teacher. Okay, I would like to move on to the next myth. And just a reminder, if you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comment section. I will check them later and try to answer them. So, the next myth is all about a fear of a common people that spiritual development will bring them to loss of social motivation. This is especially scary for those who have tons of liabilities, like people who have family and kids, mortgages, or career plans. They are truly afraid that starting spiritual path will make them lose motivation to fulfill their daily obligations and responsibilities. I'm very well aware of this fear. I know lots of smart people, and among them are lots of top managers that at some point shared their feelings and fears with me. During 20 years of interaction with the social, active, and successful people, I stumbled upon this anxiety time after time. They're afraid to go deeply into their spiritual life because they think they will want to abandon their work, their career, their lifestyle that they have now. It seems to them that all they would want to do is to sit and meditate in a cave. They are afraid they will stop wanting to work. I have two things to say about that, but first I would like to add another very similar fear. It is a fear to lose your personality and your unique characteristics. Losing motivation is very similar in a sense to losing personality. So there's also this deep fear that the spiritual path can bring you to depersonalization and following absence of motivation. What I would like to say about it is that those of you who have access to the ancient traditional text will find that spiritual path is a path of liberation. And you might ask, a liberation from what? It's a liberation from emotional roller coaster. A liberation from constant chasing desires and satisfactions, freedom from fears like losing your achievements or never achieve what you want, liberation from hopes that at the end of the day you will find what you're looking for. All this causing an ending affliction. And a lot of people are stuck in this emotional roller coaster between a few minutes of being happy and then long-term feeling unhappy. Long-term of chasing the desires and running away from fears. A person who is ready to end and escape this unending emotional swings starts the path of liberation. He starts the path of enlightenment. You will begin by reading ancient texts and finding out that the freedom is a personal inner power. Actually, the exact translation of the word liberation from the Tibetan language is the inner power. And that answers our question. So, the person who is on the way to achieve liberation is actually achieving a personal inner power. And that empowers him to escape the emotional swings of being happy and unhappy, of all those applications created by hopes and fears. And obviously, the person who is aiming for liberation will not lose his motivation and personality, but the opposite of that. He is obtaining personal power. He gathers his power as a spirit, as a personality, and as a personality that is perceived by others. And again, when this concept is wrongly taken to the edges, to the extremes, it roots to opposing each other myth. Some may believe that if he will get very spiritual, he will lose his motivation for social success and will definitely fail because he will be meditating in a cave instead of working. While others assume that spirituality will provide them with a huge social success. As we know, the truth is always in the middle. There are different stages of spiritual development. In some moments, you will definitely feel the necessity to take a break and be alone. At these moments, you will organize your life in such a way that you will find time to go to the retreat. In other moments, when it's needed, you will dive into your business or other activity with unprecedented productivity. So your current events are correlated with what's required for your liberation at this specific moment. For one person, it might be solitude, and for another, it might be a time to gather as many people as possible around him. Depending on the person's karma, he will have to serve others for a year or a decade, or maybe for the rest of his life. This situation will be constantly transforming, so there is never one answer that it should be only one way or another. It is an individual process that will be undergoing changes, and different things will be required from a person at different times. However, I would like to emphasize that the person who chose a spiritual path is often required and even forced to gather his personal inner power. Let's give an example of someone who has financial liabilities that he cannot refuse. Okay, so this person is at the moment financially dependent on someone, and he will be put in a situation where he has to overcome his fear that he won't manage to earn money and start to earn money, or someone who is financially dependent on someone of his family members. Let's say this person is financially dependent on his spouse. His new worldview won't allow him to use his spouse anymore. He cannot use his charisma and charms to continue using the resources. If before that this person believed that this is the normal way of life to get advantage of someone else, after starting a spiritual path, he becomes truly objectively independent. If this person has financial liabilities that are deeply intertwined with him, for example, he has kids or a family, work service or karmic obligations, he will continue to earn money, but he will do it in an independent way. His financial sources become very flexible and interchangeable. He usually will have a few of those sources. And that illustrates that principle that the life of the spiritual practitioner is stable and imbalanced in every field, also financially. It's stable financially not from the perspective of social success, but from the perspective of the individual needs of this practitioner. As my teacher used to say, the gods give everything. So, if you are truly standing on the path of the liberation, you will see some physical evidence of the blessing you received. You will see signs, or you will notice that it became much easier for you to achieve what you need. As I said before, there are always evil entities around that would like to interfere with your development. But as long as you do something for those entities to bring back the blessing, and then you will see physical evidence that you are on the right way. That's what I had to say for today. I would love to know if you have any questions and answer them. I think we should sum up what we talked about today, because we covered a lot of topics. So, first of all, we talked about what should one do if he lost the blessing and protection of the teacher. This situation often happens to the students. And then we talked about the myth that a spiritual practitioner is kind, spineless, and manageable because he cannot resist you. Then we talked about the myth that there should be only blooming and prosperity in the teaching environment, whereas in reality you will stumble upon some destruction as well. Then we also talked about the myth that spirituality can lead to depersonalization and absence of motivation. And the last point we covered was that the spiritual protectors are always giving physical signs that you are on the right path. If it is so, your financial situation will get stable and meet your requirements. Nevertheless, your requirements will be changing, the same as the activities you'll be doing. At some point, you'll be required to spend more attention on your family and the home, and your income will go up at this point. And later, when it's time for you to go to retreat and do meditations and spend more time for spirituality, you will be working less, and your income will also slow down accordingly. So, the life is flexible, and everything should be aimed for the quickest way to liberation. I would like to thank you all for your attention, and may we all come to the enlightenment. Om.
Надеюсь, что эту тему продолжим.